And they love to tie all this stuff to emotion, don't they?
Mm.
Like we have all the grandmas and that who they just want to cook food for people, and it's always these massive meals, big heavy meals. Oh, come in and eat food, and that's them thinking they're loving and being good because all these things. But yeah, that they love to tie it to emotion. So, and we see it at the moment, right? People think they're doing the right thing, but clearly, when you look at the results, which is a thing that people don't look a lot at, right? The results, they keep doing the same things, getting the same result, and they're like, why isn't this working? It's like, well, because you keep doing the same thing. And even if you go to a restaurant and everyone's got their meal and you order a salad, everyone will be like, oh, is that all you're having? What's wrong with you? So it's this big, it's almost like a social construct to get you to consume, isn't it?
Well, and I like how you said that. It's like the pawns are put in place to push the
Mm,
narrative when the people over here, the kings and and the queens, when they're not pushing it, you have these pawns in place
yeah.
that they push the narrative, right? Then the kings and queens aren't even doing it. It's the pawns that are around. And I like how you said that because yeah, that will usually that's what usually will happen. You can maybe feel like an outcast for not consuming the same in which other people are consuming. But like you said, that consuming or the constant consuming of chemicals is leading to the same outcome, right? The sickness, the health issues, the ailments, all of these things. And it's like once you eliminate why would you ever want to go back to it? And that's what I've started to see where, I look at things and go, that's not even food anymore.
Alrighty, hello and welcome. Campbell here with Lorenzo, and we have Matt from Cultivate Elevate with us. Many of you have seen Matt around with his electroculture, and today we're going to have a bit of a different conversation. We're going to go down more of the health route. Matt sort of had a bit of a health journey, and of course, a lot of people are having, um, you know, I suppose we've got to be careful with what we say, but issues with their body machines, shall we say? So. Welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good, good, good. Happy to be on again with you.
Yeah. Thanks. And welcome, Lorenzo. How are you?
Hello, hello. I'm
Oh, there
good.
he is.
Good. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to hearing this journey.
yeah,
I know
yeah.
there's a lot of people have had health issues and have come back from that and would like to see how to get better.
Yeah, and obviously, alternatives from the systematic, ways, shall we say, as we self-censor ourselves here on YouTube. All right, so well, let's just jump into it, Matt. Obviously, your channel, Cultivate Elevate, links below, guys. But that's also a website, isn't it, that you've developed? So, do you want to just, start and tell us a bit about yourself and your journey and sort of how you got here?
Of course. So we started Cultivate Elevate to provide solutions and not fear. And we have a bunch of different products on our website, which are all superfoods. And I'm very big at finding pathways which need nutrition and fulfilling those pathways. Because what I realized is, when I was first getting into health and fitness, and this was years ago, and learning about, proteins, carbs, and fats, right? Because that's like what they tell you. They tell you the traditional stuff. And then they give you a food pyramid and they tell you to eat, 5 servings of this and 2 servings of that, and you'll be, healthy. That's what they tell you. And, so when I first got into that, a lot of that didn't make any sense, and I was actually training a lot of people. I was in the fitness world, I was helping them, get back on their journey, but it was more of a lifestyle change. It wasn't just, changing one thing. They had to change their lifestyle. So when I was having my health ailments and I was having all my health issues, I was basically I'd get tonsillitis, right, all the time. My tonsils would swell to almost like balloons where they would touch and I would barely be able to breathe. I would get allergic issues where I would get maybe like skin issues. I would get horrible sinus infections, killer headaches, all these health ailments, bloating, acne, anything you can think of, it was occurring to me in my 20s to my about mid 20s. And I didn't put together my what was going into my body, right? So the nutrition factor, what foods were going into my body. I was just eating whatever. I did not know. I ate some grass-fed beef, but that was about it. I tried all the diets. I did it all, vegan, vegetarian, paleo, all the different things because one I thought would lead to another. And as I was getting into all these things, I started, getting into realizing that I think I'm causing my own problem. And basically, when I would go to eat something, I would start to get a reaction, you know. But every time I would go to the professional, the professional would tell me, oh, it's genetic, you're just getting older, all this funny stuff that they always tell us and whatever else, and then would just keep me coming back for more. But I started thinking, maybe something's off here. And I watched this documentary. It was called GMOs Revealed, and it was 22 hours long. And this documentary showed me a whole different light of what our food system has become, right? Our food system has actually become a weapon. And I say that because we're not eating the apples from 1902 anymore. We're eating these genetically modified foods, which have had genes, if genes are real, switched on and off. They spray them with pesticides and all kinds of fumigating gases and all kinds of stuff. And then you get to the grocery store, it's sit underneath these lights, and it's basically it's lost its mineral content. That's the easiest way to put it. So, we're eating this food and we're not bringing nutrients into the body. So I wanted to try to find solutions, and a lot of our different superfoods hit on different areas which are usually lacking in those nutrients. But when I started cleaning up my diet, I went all organic. I started cleaning up my water. I stopped drinking the tap water and I started filtering and drinking distilled water. And I started changing all of these things. Magically and instantaneously, I did not get sick anymore. I did not have tonsillitis. I did not have any health ailments. I did not have any problems. I didn't have sleeping issues. Everything pretty much all went away. And I thought, wow, that was it. I just had to change what I was doing and what I'm consciously consuming. Now, this can go into multiple other things. You can obviously talk about, frequencies and Wi-Fi and all of those, which we can also hit on as well too. But for the majority, it was just changing my diet from whatever I was consuming that I thought was it's just food. It's just a restaurant. It's just salt. When I started realizing those things were not exactly what they were, instantaneously as I changed over those things, a lot of things all went away. And, the documentary, it's called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Half Dead. It's a great documentary where this guy basically, he just did green juicing. That was it. He didn't do anything special. He just did green juicing. And that was another great documentary. He fixed all of his ailments, all of the professionals who were giving him these little, tablets and these things and all of those. He got off all that stuff, all of the things in which he was prescribed. He got off all those just by drinking green juice, which now we know is structured water, right? In that form of that structured water. And he was healed. So as I learned all of this, I started incorporating all those things and basically just started to realize that we've been tricked in many ways. And our food system is one of those ways, which is keeping us in this system, this sick care system that is constantly making profits and money off of us and not actually really caring about our health at all, right? Because what I learned is the professionals, every professional you go and visit only has 5 hours of nutrition in
Yes.
10 years of schooling, right? So when we think about that, how are they going to be able to address the root cause if they've only studied food for 5 or 5
5 hours.
hours
Yeah.
out of 10 years? It doesn't make any sense.
It's just
So,
crazy, isn't it?
when I started realizing all that, it really changed. And so now I've been on a mission with Cultivate Elevate, as we talked last time about electroculture and growing our own food, but also just being connected and, really connecting to our health too, because health is wealth. And when we take care of ourselves, I see it as we are unstoppable, right? That's another part of what that system doesn't want, because then it doesn't make money anymore, because that money wants us to keep having all these health ailments so that they can come up with new terms and new terminology that you've never heard of before, of all these different things that are all the same exact thing. You just haven't been taking care of your body and your terrain in enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's GIGO, right? Remember that? Garbage in, garbage out that we used to use back in the day. But I mean, this is the thing. We've been taught everything's physical, and they love to talk about, molecules and you need these supplements and all this kind of stuff. But to me, everything's energy, right? Like I think it's more geometry. Like we're talking about structured water and that, and the body's you need the right geometry in your body, I think, rather than But it's funny that they poison the food, we get sick, and then they offer us poison as the cure, right?
That's it. That's the poison to the poison. And then you just keep
Oh,
coming back for more because you've never addressed that root cause, which was the poison in the first place. And I realize when you get rid of that, you become a different person. You become your original person who was not
Mm.
having all those health ailments, you know, and then they can't pull the same stuff of, oh, you know, you're coming down with something. No, I've been poisoning myself and I need to be self accountable on that, right? And that's
Mm.
another part that takes a lot of power to say I need to be self accountable on what I'm consuming and also what I'm feeding,
yeah.
let's say, you know, my kids and my pets and all of those other things too.
I mean, that's a very good point, and we love to say, it's all your fault. But this is the thing, like you said, it's just decisions, right? Some people, and I hear it a lot is, oh, all the water's poisoned, all the food's poisoned. Oh my God, things in the air. But in the end, we can do things about all of that, can't we? And I think even just the act of thinking that it's bad impacts us, right? If you're walking around going, oh my God, all the air's full of stuff that's broken, well, your body's probably going to take that in and go, oh, okay, well, I wonder what the effects of that are. Let's throw this at you, right?
Yes, yes, 100%. And everything is a frequency, right? And if we decide to subscribe or consent to that frequency, we can actually get messed with. And perfect example is one day I was driving down the street and I had the meters to check the towers. And I drove past the tower and it was emitting zero frequencies. And I thought, is that there just to create a placebo effect? Right? Because
Mm.
you see it and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, it's right next to my house, but it wasn't turned on. So then it's like, they just playing games? And then, like you said, same thing with the skies, right? What happens if stuff maybe we see up there is not in the same sense? It could be just playing mind games too, and the mind can create even worse situations. And that I've seen too with people even just exercising too. They could beat themselves up while they're exercising and then they won't be able to do it. But if they tell themselves that they can do it, the mind will already, it's like the mind is already two steps ahead and going to allow, the action to come next. But we always say, kind of like the opposite, where it's like I thought that and now I'm doing it. But the mind is, at least in my opinion, with the ether, 2, 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. For
Oh,
sure. I
sorry.
mean, your intent is so important in what you create and what you don't create. And, I've seen that too with even the chemtrails. If I say it's a sunny day and I mean it, I've noticed the sun will break through the BS that's in the skies. Or if I walk around feeling like, oh my goodness, they're doing bad things to me or they're poisoning me, then I'll have, a shitty, sad day, so to speak. So really, like how did you jump from, I guess, this experience that you've had to your company and the products that you have? I'm very curious to how you developed, the dragon's blood and the pearls and those and got them to become, available and helpful for the people that are using them.
So when I was in the fitness world and I owned a gym and I saw all types of feats of strength with people doing like 1,000-pound deadlifts and all kinds of things, which are just, energy related, right? We're all connected. When I was in there too, I was also in the supplement world and I learned about supplements and vitamins, but I learned about the traditional supplements and vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, caffeine, creatine, monohydrates, all those things, right? And those, in my opinion, are synthetic, right? Everything is synthetic. And so when I was going through my health journey and I moved out to Arizona, I started getting into like a lot of things related to mushrooms, right? Like different types of healing mushrooms. I got into stuff related to ormus and monatomics, all of that as well, which is related to structure and putting structured things into the body. I got into different types of herbs. I actually used to brew up all different types of teas and different types. If you saw it, you would think it's like sludge, but it was tea, with all these different herbs, and I would mix and match and all these things. And as I kind of started going more into that route, right, where everything was coming from nature or from an herb or from something from the earth, right, I started to then, get into these different superfoods. And then as like, even with the dragon's blood, when I got into that one, it was because I found out it was originally from the Draco tree, which is that the tree it's this big, beautiful tree that I believe is connected to Atlantis, right? It used to be on Atlantis, and then somehow the seeds kind of spread to the rest of the world. But it's a ancient Draco tree that has this beautiful tree sap that causes instantaneously healing of the skin. And that's what, same thing with turpentine, same thing with maple syrup, right? All the beautiful saps of the tree. Those are very powerful healing properties that the shamans and the druids used to use all back in the time as well too. But as I would learn about these things, I was like, people have got to be able to have access to this, right? Because we always have access to, I don't know, a bunch of vitamin C powders, and whatever else. But a lot of this stuff is synthetic. And the other issue is a lot of the inactive ingredients in some of these vitamins and supplements are all blocking the ability for you to absorb something. So, for example, very simple one, vitamin D, right? If a vitamin D supplement contains soy lecithin, the soy lecithin actually blocks the ability for you to absorb vitamin D. So it pretty much renders that product completely null, right? Because you can't absorb it. So now the question is how many other products are out like that? And then because they are in this synthesized form, do we even absorb them? Right? That's the other thing I really got into, because if I brew, for example, you up a tea of like guasa tea, right? The tea that they used to use in South America, it was called guasa tea. They would drink it as they would basically hunt at nighttime, right? It would give the body energy for about 12 to 16 hours. And it was called the tea of the night watcher, right? And they would drink that so that they could stay up while they were hunting their animals, and doing their things. And that was a natural form of caffeine, which is just steadily like this, right? Just very nice and calm. But when we take something synthetic into the body, and there's a lot of different drinks we can go, that can be an instantaneous jolt and too much for the body, and then the body begins to crash. So as I started learning more about balance, right, like just balancing the body and understanding harmony in the body, that's when I started understanding more into like the pearl, the dragon's blood, the shilajit, black ginger, all these different things that feed the different pathways, but that are much more available for the body to absorb rather than something that's just, put together and has flavor added to it, right? Because it's like where do we find that in nature, right? Like I don't go out into nature. Now it was interesting. The book I was reading from 1902 was saying how all flavoring agents used to be from peaches, strawberry, cinnamon, blackberries, blueberries, all the real thing. And they actually didn't use artificial flavors because they said it has a horrible taste. And their customers in 1902 did not enjoy that. Now, look at what we've changed to now. And you fast forward, a lot of these flavoring agents and all of these things have changed our taste palates and then also change our brain. So I try to stick to everything that's one ingredient. A few of our blends have like 3 or 4 ingredients, but they're all mushrooms and superfoods. But I try everything that's just pure nature. That's it. Because if all 3 of us out went on a hike right now and I took you to find some mesquite plants, we would eat that mesquite and it would have, the sweetness and the savory flavors and those things. And it wouldn't have anything else. And it wouldn't come in a synthetic form. It would just come in whatever form the earth decides to give it to us at.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think this one of the biggest problems is the consumer society, right? It's like you were talking about the vitamins and that. It's like if these big companies put out products that actually work, then we only buy them once, right? And they want us to be repeat customers. So, and also, like you said, you can walk into a a pharmacy, a drugstore, and there's a billion different vitamins. But like if they work, we've had those for decades. Why people keep getting sicker, right? So I mean, it's quite obvious that I think we are nature, right? So nature is the way to heal ourselves, but they love to sort of teach us that we're not and we're apart from it. And of course, there's a big push at the moment for this non-humanism, shall I call it? But yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about the 2 different grids recently, like the closed sort of electric grid versus the natural grid, right? With the natural energies. And I think that's a lot of people are starting to realize we need to get back to the natural energy, right? Even like grounding, walking barefoot, on the ground, sitting near trees, which are natural antennas, all these things, we have been removed from our life, haven't they? Like we've literally been, it's like you said with the flavor enhancers and that, like everything, the way we view and the way we interact with life has just all been made more synthetic, and clearly we're not synthetic, so it's not good for us.
Yeah, and they're trying to turn us into something that doesn't fit the earth anymore, right? Because like we all are sitting on here, and if you look at animals and insects and birds and bees, they all seem very, perfectly put here, right? But we're almost like being inverted to not be perfectly put here, almost like as they try to tell us we're going to go somewhere else, which is a whole nother story as well. It's like, you don't want to stay here. You want to go somewhere else. What's wrong with here? But yeah, through this inversion, and like you said too, with the grounding, right? Being out in nature, putting your feet barefoot in the earth is so beneficial. You're increasing the electrical conductivity of your body. This is why walking on the beach is so healing. You're standing first barefoot on silica, which is complete quartz crystal, right? Which has that piezoelectric effect. Then you have water waves, which is from salt water, which is completely conductive, spiraling in vortexes while you're walking on that sand. And then you have the sun coming down, beaming on your beautiful crystalline structured body and enhancing that energy. So you're charging the whole station, right? This whole crystalline station like that. And just going out into nature and being connected to the sun and to nature can heal anything. They just don't talk about that because that competes with the sick care system always making money. They don't fund a single study related to the benefits of the sun. They also don't fund a single study that says when you go to consume something, what is the reaction when you're placed into the sun, right? If we get into alchemy and the chemical processes and all of those things, if you go to eat something and sit out in the sun, there's a chemical process which takes place. They don't fund any studies related to that either, right? Because those could actually lead to more like of people going, maybe I shouldn't take that, right? And I think that's why they push SPF and sunscreen so much, right? Because they know that if people are taking these poisons and then they go sit out in the sun, they could have adverse reactions, which are very bad. So they need to put SPF on their body instead to block that sun so that the body doesn't have that chemical process, which is interesting because it relates exactly to what you said. Taking away the processes of the human, right? And disconnecting them from what is beautiful and the earth and the energy and the frequency and the structure while destructuring them in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So what have you discovered on the ormus side of things? I'm very interested in that aspect of what you're doing.
So ormus is very fascinating, and I've tried quite a different selections of them. I've tried a whole bunch of different people's concoctions, from homemade to big brands and things like that and whatever else. What I've noticed with it is it depends on which ormus you're taking, and it also depends on the metal in which you're consuming, right? So they have like copper, there's platinum, there's gold, there's silver. Some of them are a blend of iridium, rhodium, and different types of metals as well. So it depends on kind of what you're looking to do, right? Because each one conducts in a different way. But ormus is very fascinating because it kicks on parts of the brain that I feel that have been turned off due to whatever. I mean, it could be multiple things from our terrain to the frequencies and everything else. But I really feel that ormus kind of shows you a different light of things. And now they do have ones that are also derived from salt, which are really cool, where people make them out of all different types of cell salts and things like that. But ormus, as I got into it and explored it and messed with it, it's a interesting one. And I just to say for anybody who does get into it or starts to want to learn about it, to just be careful with that, because you're exploring a side of your brain that you don't know exists. That's the best way to describe it. And it's going to kick on pathways in which you haven't experienced. And sometimes that takes a lot. And I will tell you, certain things like LED lights and those things, right? The non-natural things that they try to sell us all the time. When you're on any of those things, right? Anything related to ormus or the sea salts or anything else like that, they are about 100 times worse, right? Because they are not natural. So your body is really heightened to how unnatural things become, because the ormus is working as a conductor in your body. It's feeding those conductive circuits, which have been disabled over time. But so if you are using any of that, it's important to be aware kind of where you're going, and some people, if you want to go into like the Mad Hatter and all that funny stuff that they used to say about the mercury and everything, ormus can kind of fit in that realm if we use that as an example. I'm not saying that that example is correct, but I'm just using it as an example that, you know, when you do mess around or mess with ormus or things like that, you are kind of seeing a different light of things. And that's the easiest way to describe it. But I've tried a whole bunch. I've used a ton of different ones just because when I was going through different things, I was trying different things to kind of see how I felt. And it just depends on who made it, you know. And I think the best people who make it are alchemists, real alchemists, you know, not just another store selling you some, you know, it's got a little logo on it or something. But I think real alchemists who actually studied alchemy, I think that's where your best bet is when you get into that topic.
Nice. I want to. I've had a toothache recently, and I've heard you talking about the pearl powder. Is that good? Because I've heard you. I think it's good for like keratin and sort of stuff. Is it? Yeah. Tell us. And also, just for everyone watching, there'll be a link below if you want to check out the products from Cultivate Elevate. Link below, 10% off with the code word. Unfortunately, though, if you're in Australia like me, the government are communists and they won't let the products in. So, but everyone else, yeah, the link below. So yeah, what's pearl powder? Because I hadn't actually heard about pearl powder at all, like you know, consuming pearl until you basically. So, what's pearl powder? What's the deal?
So pearls are, you know, if we go back into Ayurvedic medicine and all the healing ways in which they used to use pearls, they actually used to grind up pearls and give them to people. They gave them to people if they were having sleeping issues, right? Because there's magnesium carbonate inside of pearl. So it's very easy for that pearl to absorb into the system and that magnesium to get into the body. There's also calcium carbonate, selenium carbonate. There's tons of amino acids. And related to the teeth, which is funny that you say that, is because so two things can help for the teeth. You can use pearl powder, you can do coconut oil pulling, or the other option is you could get clove oil, clove essential oil, and that can actually be helpful for your teeth as well too. And that's a really simple one to do as well. But with the pearls, it's interesting because with the Mayans and this in South America as well too, they used to use pearls to replace people's teeth. So if a person was having a tooth issue, we would use the pearl. And they can just put the pearl in the mouth because it's the same DNA as the human. So it would fit exactly for the tooth. You know, so when we think about our whole tooth industry, right, what do they usually give you? Some plastics or polymers created by DuPont, right?
Yep.
It'll give you something out of nature, but we could be using that for those purposes. The
Okay.
other thing that's cool about pearl is that it's really great at healing the eyes. There was a study where a lady tested, it was about 100 different people, and they had cataracts, and they were developing these cataracts over time, and they started giving them pearl powder for about 60 days, and about 75% of those people, their cataracts were completely dissolved. And that was just using pearl powder. So they consumed it orally, and then they also just rubbed a little bit around with an oil, you know, oil base of what they chose, and they put a little bit around the eyes and around the eyelids. And the whole reason we're having eye issues, I've realized, is because our eyes aren't getting nutrients anymore, right? We don't. What do we eat that provides it? We used to eat carrots, you know, and you used to see the little eye in there, and you would, you know, that would give it. But there's not many foods that are providing the nutrition for the eye. And because of all of our frequencies, this is, I think, one of the biggest parts with that. With all of these frequencies, they're dehydrating the body. And what is the first place that has that water, the most structured water in your whole body? Your eye. So, so pearl powder can actually work really well at bringing back the hydration factor because there's 2% water in a pearl. So that water is structured and can help heal the eyes and bring back the eyesight. And I had a bunch of testimonials. I put them all up there. You know, I take people's comments and I put them all together so people can see, and I put them into some little snippets and stuff so that people can see, you know, other people who are saying like, I'm not using my glasses anymore. I had another person who her husband was legally blind and he is seeing color now, which is just, you know, remarkable. So I've started to realize that, you know, in relation to we're never running out of food and we're never running out of water, we also can self-regenerate. We just have to be provided with the right things, and the body will just instantaneously regenerate back to its, you know, former self. That's what I've started to realize.
How about black ginger? I'm curious about that. You mentioned that earlier in the chat. Is that something you use in some of your supplements, or is that just something you've studied in your past?
So we have a product called chai, which is a combination of cocoa, organic lion's mane, and then black ginger. And black ginger is a really cool one for cleaning out the blood, right? And improving the lymphatic system, getting the blood going, getting the brain going, and really improving digestion, right? Because a lot of us all have poor digestion. It's very simple. People are not, their track is not moving. That's the best way to describe it. And black ginger can come in there and make everything kind of start moving again. And because when I was going through my health journey, right, and I was learning about enemas and I was learning about fasting, right, those two things, they never tell us to fast. That's number one, right? Our system never tells us to fast. And the other part about it is with the enemas clean out the insides and get the body going again, right? So black ginger can actually work really well at helping that digestion going. And there was a great documentary where they basically showed, and this was in multiple different countries, from Thailand to Philippines, all over Indonesia, basically, where they started doing enemas with people, right? Just say 2 times a day, they would do an enema, and they would have them do like green juicing and smoothies for, let's say, about 30 days to 60 days, right? Every ailment, every illness, every problem that they were facing was completely resolved from just cleaning out the gut lining. And when I was getting into my health journey, I realized that if the gut is full, right, and the stomach is all bound up and not moving, your brain doesn't work, right? Because your energy is all in there's so much energy going on inside your gut lining of everything trying to break down that your brain can't function. So, part of our society too is constantly consuming food, and that can actually work against us because it slows us down. There's never a time, even with all of the, the shortages we all faced, but with all of those going on, food was still in the grocery store, right? It might have been less and people might have been whatever, but there was still a lot of food present. Reason being is because when people go into a fasted state, they actually start to get stronger. They actually start to get more powerful, right? So they always are trying to bring that food back into the body. And it was interesting. There was a book that showed when people fast, they took 2 animals. They took it was basically 2 mice, right? And one mouse, they fed a ton of food, and the mouse got heavy set, started losing his hair, started having all kinds of issues, right? The other mouse, on the other hand, they fasted, and they only fed that mouse, I think it was like once a week. This mouse that fasted lived 5 years longer than this mouse, which was fed all the time, having all these health ailments. So that's another part I feel that goes together. And the reason I relate it to the black ginger is because black ginger can help improve your digestion and get things flowing so that the body can be functioning at its optimized level.
Yeah, I mean, the food's a good one, isn't it? There's so much. I mean, we call it a consumerism society. There's just so much, all these snack foods, right? Like people just sit there and just snack constantly while they eat movies and while they watch movies and things. And like you say, it's just filling up the body, right? Like constantly, and it can't cope with it all. So it's very interesting that like I guess fasting is a bit of detoxing as well, right? It's giving your body that break that it can like go and just get all the crap out and blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean it all comes back to this, what are we taking in really, isn't it? Like um again, it's probably the whole thing with food, like the 3 meals, like what do you think that's been introduced? Because obviously breakfast, right? It's break fast. It's to break the fast. So you fast at a certain time at night, and so as far as I know, breakfast used to be lunch. It used to be from when the sun is highest in the sky, and that's when they'd break the fast and they'd eat until dusk, basically until sunset. I think it comes from the Essenes. But we have these things. But now everyone wakes up and they have this massive breakfast. Then they have a big lunch and then they have a big dinner and go to bed with all this stuff in their stomach. Because I remember there's another I got taught when I was younger about food. There used to be a saying that said, eat like I think it said a king at breakfast, a prince at lunch, and a pauper at night. Basically saying don't eat a lot before you go to bed. So I think just the way that we're brought up, and kids, like babies, you see it all the time. Like, no, I don't want it. And the parents go, no, you must eat it. Oh, here comes the plate. Open up. You've got to have it. And the kid's like, man, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And so we get fully just programmed, right? That we need to be consuming constantly, and that food equals energy and all this weird stuff. When that's clearly not the case.
Well, and there was a book I was reading from like 1898 that was talking about what people would eat, right? Like it was what they were supposed to eat, which I thought was really funny. Like I don't think that's what they were eating, but that's what they were told they were supposed to be eating. And it related to like exactly like you said, all these meals, very heavy meals, right? These meals were like, when I was reading the book, it was like, who's going to eat this at breakfast or even like lunch or whatever, even let alone dinner? And I think really, like you said too, that 3 meals is really to keep people coming back, right? Because if you told people only 2 meals, well, now you already lost an entire meal of profit, or a lot of restaurants wouldn't be able to even sell the first meal, right? So, I think that's part of that. And yes, it doesn't make any sense. And I've never been much to eat breakfast, at all. If anything, I'll do a coffee with some raw milk and then I'll put my mushrooms in there or some shilajit or something like that. And then I just start my day. That's pretty much how it's been for about the last, I don't even know, 8 to 10 years, right? Or maybe even longer than that. Because when I used to eat breakfast, back when I was in like my 20s and even in high school and stuff, I would eat. And I remember like I would go to class and I would just fall asleep. I would just fall like instantaneously. I was so unproductive. It's not even funny, but I would eat that first meal and just be out. And so if we're trying to have a productive society, maybe we are supposed to be eating less, right? So we can be more productive. Because an interesting thing is if you if you do a fast for, let's say, like half the day, as soon as you go to eat, all of a sudden you get all relaxed, you get all calm, you get all, kind of like mellow, right? And that's because now the blood is working for that digestion again. So I think the whole 3 meals, like you were saying, is just a programming. And then if it's not a programming, like you said, you have, relatives who are like, oh, no, it's you got to do this. And it's like, nah, no, you don't. And that's been my take. Nobody should be forced to be, fed. And also too, because a lot of the times that forceful feeding is a lot of toxic stuff too, and that's contributing to these health ailments that a lot of people are suffering from because, also in a social setting, feeling acceptable or normal, right? In that sense is forcing that onto the people. And that's another part of which I definitely don't agree on as well too.
And they love to tie all this stuff to emotion, don't they? Like we have all the grandmas and that who they just want to cook food for people, and it's always these massive meals, big heavy meals. And I come in and eat food, and that's them thinking they're loving and being good because all these things, yeah, they love to tie it to emotion. So, and we see it at the moment, right? People think they're doing the right thing, but clearly, when you look at the results, which is a thing that people don't look a lot at, right? The results, they keep doing the same things, getting the same result, and they're like, why isn't this working? It's like, well, because you keep doing the same thing. So yeah, that's very interesting too, like this whole food thing. And even if you go to a restaurant and everyone's got their meal and you order a salad, everyone will be like, oh, is that all you're having? What's wrong with you? So it's this big, it's almost like a social construct to get you to consume, isn't it?
Well, and I like how you said that. It's like the pawns are put in place to push the narrative when the people over here, the kings and and the queens, when they're not pushing it, you have these pawns in place that they push the narrative, right? Then the kings and queens aren't even doing it. It's the pawns that are around. And I like how you said that because that's what usually will happen. You can maybe feel like an outcast for not consuming the same in which other people are consuming. But like you said, that consuming or the constant consuming of chemicals is leading to the same outcome, right? The sickness, the health issues, the ailments, all of these things. And it's like once you eliminate it, why would you ever want to go back to it? And that's what I've started to see where, I look at things and go, that's not even food anymore. This stuff it doesn't even look like food. I know what things look like when you make them from scratch and things like that. This doesn't even look like this. This is like a cartoon. It almost looks like cartoon food, you know,
Totally.
and that's the thing. The brain begins to change as the frequencies change too of what you're bringing in your body, because then you begin to recognize what is real versus also what is fake, you know, and that's it, it's wild.
I've gone through whole supermarkets in Canada, and it just looks like circus food, aisle after aisle after aisle of something that should not be eaten. You know, maybe in this society, you mentioned a productive society. I wonder what they're trying to produce. You know, have you ever watched the old documentaries or the old dance shows? Like I watch them from the 60s, 70s, and everyone in the audience is skinny, right? And everyone dancing. And now you see the modern ones, and everyone's 4 times the size, like not even double the size now. Like everyone's 4 times the size, and people don't understand, you know, something funny is going on.
Yep. And it relates, you know, to multiple things of food. And then you got frequencies too, right? The frequencies, it changes a lot too, and slows down the metabolism, you know, and that's another one that I notice, you know, is not always hit on, but that's another one that's a culprit. And I've realized that like even things like diabetes are directly related to electricity and frequencies. You know, it's wild. It's another one that's not mentioned ever. And that's because they can't get rid of Rockefeller electricity, right? That would be, you wouldn't make any money anymore, you know? So you see it like that.
Yeah, they can't tell us their frequency because then all their cures go out the window, right? Because they're all physical. So this is the thing. It's like frequency is just such a big factor. And we've really got to, you know, as well as what we take into our body, like, well, we take in things physically, but we also take them in, you know, mentally, energetically, emotionally. So that's the other thing that people don't focus on. Like we've just been told everything's physical, there's nothing else. But I mean, you mentioned it before, like what gets me all the time is the placebo effect. Like that was proved back in the 60s. You know, people still don't understand what that means. That tells you that experiment tells you that your mind can cure anything, and it probably creates everything as well. It just does my head in.
So I'd like to hear a little more, if you don't mind, on the electroculture and how you say it slows down the metabolism and things like that. That's very interesting.
So there was a great book called The Invisible Rainbow, and it talks all about the frequencies. And I highly recommend everybody check out this book. It was by Arthur Fistenberg. And basically, it was a really great example that he showed. And this was, I'll just put it into a little summary, but he basically showed that, you know, heart disease and the C word and diabetes all came about once electricity was introduced, right? So those three illnesses all came about as soon as we had this alteration of our frequency, 60 hertz, right? The alternating current, which is constantly sending a signal back and forth between the power supply, makes absolutely no sense. That's why fires start happening all the time, but you know, that's another story. So with this book, The Invisible Rainbow, he showed that the country of Bhutan, and this was in 2002, the country of Bhutan basically did everything the old school way. They had fires, you know, they were collecting things from scratch. They were, you know, eating all different types of food. They were eating meat and vegetables and fruits and tallows and honey and all of those things, right? And what happened was once the country of Bhutan, and he shows many other examples, but I'm just giving this one as the simplest one. But once the country of Bhutan introduced a power plant into the country, diabetes went absolutely through the roof. And it was only the introduction of that power plant which changed everything, because they didn't change what they were doing. They were still eating the meats, they were still eating the vegetables, the fruits, the honey, and all the still stuff, right? They weren't doing anything different. It was just the introduction of the power plant. And he showed many other variations where people, for example, when they're exposed to a lot of these frequencies, right? What happens is the body eats up a lot of blood sugar very quickly, right? And then people start to get dizzy and they start to get, you know, like low blood sugar. And he showed this with bees. He showed this with like different birds, different animals as well too. When they're exposed to these frequencies, their blood sugar is completely altered. So if you think about it, if your pancreas is not functioning the way it's supposed to and not producing insulin, then you start to have all types of health ailments, which are being related to either electricity or these frequencies of bringing these Wi-Fi boxes into your house or whatever it may be. And you might not realize that that is actually what's slowing down your metabolism and altering your cells. And what I realized with that is that with this electricity situation, we never know of where diabetes type 1 came from, right? Remember every time they're like, oh, we still don't know, can't figure it out, can't whatever. Well, if the pancreas is electrified and cannot function properly based on its terrain, right, then the insulin cannot be produced, which would then in turn mean that the electricity was the culprit, right? And if we look at that from a larger spectrum, we can look at things like the 1919 Kansas flu, right? That was the whole situation of that, the 1919 Kansas flu. You know, when that whole thing happened, it was the rollout of the radio, which started having people have all kinds of health ailments. They started hearing voices. They started losing their sense of smell, losing their sense of taste. They started getting dizzy. They started getting nauseated. It sounds a lot like 2020, but it's just in a different timeline of a different form of technology. And this book basically goes into as we've introduced all of these new versions of technology, it's just flipping the frequencies of our cells to spin the opposite direction, which results in illness. And as we connect ourselves back into nature and get into that nature frequency, that 7.83 hertz, the body begins to heal and begins to regenerate like that. And that's why when we go out in nature, we instantaneously feel better, you know, because we're connecting to not only the earth frequency that's right below us, but the entire earth, right? The whole thing. And the reason I say that is because the US Navy uses 7.83 hertz to send their frequencies all across the planet, right? Because it goes all around and it goes all around. So think about when you're standing barefoot on the earth, not only are you picking up on the frequency that's below you, but you're picking up on the entire earth. And that's the frequency that heals. But it was interesting because when I started understanding all this, I started realizing, you know, nobody ever talks about this. And I had family members who had type 1 diabetes, and nobody would explain why they were losing weight, why their pancreas was not functioning, why their blood sugar was imbalanced, why they had to carry candy in their pocket, right, to try to keep them balanced. And that was because of the electricity, and all of the introduction of this was messing with their health. And they've shown that when people get electrocuted, I guess you could say, what do? They lose weight, they lose hair, they can't function, you know, their blood sugar is imbalanced, and all of these things go hand in hand. But once again, they had to change all of the literature in the 1920s to get rid of the words microwave, radiation, poisoning, right? That one had to be taken out because so many people were experiencing that when all of these things were coming out and all of this new technology was rolling out, that they had to get rid of that one because they had to start calling it other things like influenza and all these other different things that they started naming and calling that. So, you know, or pilot's disease, right? The pilot's got an illness. So they're exposed. So, you know, it really goes hand in hand. And as you get into that book, it's a great book. It's about 500 pages long. But there's so many more examples where they show about how these frequencies and bringing these things into our home and all this new forms of technology and new watches and new whatever else that they try to sell you are all emitting the same frequencies, messing up our health and not actually uplifting our health.
Yeah, well, Rockefeller said he would have everyone covered in plastic, I think back in around 1900 or so. And I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, just even cookware. I mean, it's all covered in Teflon is the big one, isn't it? Like it's everywhere. I remember I got a coat, like just a jacket, or my mum bought it for me a few months ago, and it's 100% plastic. And I'd wear it. I'd be like, oh, this just doesn't. I don't know. So I went and got a new one. But this is the thing. Like if we're natural, like this is the thing. Like we're natural to the earth, but we're covering ourselves in all these unnatural products, which it really is unnatural frequencies, isn't it? Or frequency blockers. Have you got any cures, like as far as like electromagnetic radiation, I guess is what it is. What are your thoughts on that? Like, have we got anything we can use to protect ourselves against that as far as ingesting?
I was gonna say there's a couple things, you know, we put a mushroom called Mishima mushroom in our 6 mix, which is actually very healing for the body. It was shown that when the situation happened in Japan, there was a small little island which did not have any radiation poisoning whatsoever, and they were consuming Mishima mushroom. So I thought that Mishima mushroom needs to be available to people. So we put that in our 6 mix blend. And then as for healing the body, right? So there's a couple different things for people to do. You can do a lot of barefoot grounding. That would be number one. I never, step over nature. That's for sure. Nature is always first. Number two, you can get rid of Wi-Fi and hardwire your devices, right? I have a hardwire right now. It's just a wire plugged into my computer. And I just, whenever I need the internet, that's how I plug it in. And it's fast and easy. And it's actually quicker than Wi-Fi, right? Because it's instant. So then you're not pinging those unwanted frequencies in your house the entire time, which are on the same spectrum as the microwave frequency, right? It's right in that little bandwidth. So that would be another one. As for the next level, you can look into getting linen sheets, as you were just saying about clothing and material. Linen cannot gather static. So as you're sleeping, our body has a tendency to gather static as our legs are rubbing up and down against each other. And that can be primarily from the polyester in which you just mentioned, right? Because it feels like almost like sticky or grimy when you're wearing like polyester or plastic and whatever. And that's because the plastic does not resonate at the frequency of healing, right? It resonates at 0 hertz, which is actually toxic to the body, right? So when we wear things like linen, it's 5,000 plus. When we wear things like wool, it's 5,000 negative. When we wear things like cashmere, things like hemp, all these beautiful natural organic cotton, all these beautiful natural materials, they all resonate to uplift our cells and keep that frequency going. But linen sheets in your bed are probably one of the best things you can purchase to put into your home. And the reason I say this is because they do not gather static, but they also used to use these back in the hospitals in the 1900s so that they could get people in and get them out quick. Because what they noticed was when a person was sitting on linen sheets for, let's say, a couple days, the light frequency that came off those linen sheets would start to heal them faster. So if they were suffering from, say, skin ailments, their skin would heal quicker because of the linen. And if we look at all of the royals, what do they always wear? Linen. And they usually wear a color purple, which is amethyst, which represents the crown chakra as well, right? So colors can be a play. And that's another part. The colors that you wear also dictate your frequency as well. And if we have all these artificial dyed colors and fake things and all that other stuff, that can play a role on our health. And then I would say the last one that really relates is the lighting, right? Going out into natural sunlighting is very crucial. Anything LED is a digital light, right? LEDs emit digital light. So very simple ways to, elevate your home with this and get rid of that is switching from LEDs to incandescents or halogens, right? Because LEDs actually have a special little part on the side of the box that says it emits microwave radiation. And it actually has like a little warning just to tell everybody, like there's the warning. If you don't see that, if you don't turn the box, you wouldn't know it's there. And then not only that, but these LEDs emit a blue light spectrum, which can be actually very toxic to our eyes, to our health, and to our brain. And this was shown in the book, Dr. John Ott, Health and Light, where he showed the 3 ways to weaken society, which was radio frequencies, artificial light, and plastic clothes. That's it. All 3 of those on a muscle test will all produce instantaneous for their muscles to be weak. And that was very simple in his book. But so anything artificial light can mess with us a lot. And once again, I've started to realize that we have all these digital lights which produce light and color spectrums in which we cannot kind of, bring into our mind. And so what you can do is, like I have my computer on right now, I have it on black and white. So it's on a black and white setting. You click grayscale and there's no color. And then whenever I use, let's say, my phone as well, I put a grayscale on there as well, so that you're not getting these light frequencies which can disrupt the brain, right? Because we don't have as many artificial flavors or artificial colors anymore, but now we have artificial light, right? So you're just getting into a different type of thing, but that can play a big role. And like I said, the radiation which can come through those lights. And if you want to take it one step further, they can have cameras in them and they can connect up to Google and Alexa and all these other things. But, that's a whole nother topic of a whole nother video and whatever. But those are what I would be saying the best things for healing the body when it comes to, the circumstances of the frequencies in which we're bombarded with.
Very interesting. Very interesting how easy it is to kind of heal yourself by what you don't do instead of what you do. And I found, and that's always the best thing. Like you don't eat too much, you don't You don't put plastic clothes on. You don't do these things naturally. You know, our body seems to, as you mentioned, you know, has a natural tendency to heal if it's left alone to its own devices or without the devices, as the case may be.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the LED lights, and I mean, what have they been pushing for the last couple of years is all these sort of fairy light type things, and they're all LEDs, right? And people have got them everywhere.
Mm.
And this is all. I mean, I actually bought a charger for my phone like a few weeks ago, and I plugged it in, and it started lighting up. It's full of LED lights. I was like, what? So like they're getting this stuff in everywhere, and the other thing is they're not natural colors. I was thinking about it when you were talking about the food in the supermarkets. Like these are all colors, like these bright colors in nature. They mean danger, don't they? Like all the poisonous
Yes.
snakes and frogs and spiders, they all have these bright iridescent colors on them. It means danger. And now they've got us eating this stuff, eating this colored
Yeah.
food, wearing these colors and sitting under these colored lights. So it's, like, I think, the whole thing about this is we've really just got to get back to nature. It's this whole sort of which grid do you want to live in? This fake electronic grid where everything we see and hear and everything, it's all coming through an electronic filter, isn't it? Even music. I know a lot of people listen to 432 and 528 and that through the computer, but that's still coming through this electric filter, isn't it? So everything that we do really needs to get back to organic, because organic colors, they're not bright, right? They're the right frequency that we need to wear. The sort of the more muted sort of natural colors. So yeah.
And I like how you said that because, yes, linen is very natural, right?
Mm.
And also, too, if we look at the lights in which they used to have in like the 1800s, they used to use a lot of arc lighting. And they used to use some different mercury vapors, which could
Yeah.
actually produce different types of colors as well. But somehow all of those all disappeared. I wonder why. But those all disappeared. But I think those were also emitting certain frequencies, which I've noticed in one of the books I was reading that if they used mercury vapor lamps, they would last almost indefinitely, but they would
Mm.
also boost plant growth, which is
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah.
Don't
Right.
use
Right.
any of
Right.
those anymore, So we have these LEDs, which is funny because the LED box actually says this light bulb will make the plants appear greener so they look healthier. And it's on the LED grow light, right? So now you're giving, like you just said, the fake color or the perception that it is green. And you're like, oh, my plant's doing really good. And then all of a sudden, it's not doing so well, right? So same thing, what happens, like you said, when we're seeing all those colors, it could be maybe the same exact thing that's happening where
Yeah.
it's so vibrant and so crazy artificial, right? That like all of nature now looks, bland almost because you're like, wait, this doesn't even look, because it's trying to retrain, like you said, your mind to then maybe think that that is supposed to be natural when it's completely quite the opposite.
Oh, it's crazy. I went through an electronics floor here in Japan with their 70-inch screens and their 100-inch screens. There was a whole floor of these high. I almost passed out in the middle. And I was just looking for an exit to get out and went through like all these screens and you see all these, whatever video games and dancing people. And it's like literally had to grab my head and run out of there before you want to vomit. It was I don't understand how people can sit and watch this stuff all day long and, have these virtual images and virtual garbage, placed at them. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. It's like sugar gives you virtual energy, right? And
Yes.
all of these other things. Yeah. So, pushing a virtual world with virtual colors. It's an interesting end game being placed or tried to be placed on us virtually.
Yeah. You'll only be virtually alive if you follow that path.
Mm. It's been a great chat, Matt. It's been great meeting you.
Yeah.
I haven't heard any better health information in a long time than what you've shared here today. So thank you
Mm.
so much for all you've done and all you've shared and all you've been through. I think it's amazing. And I can see why your products are doing very well because you sound like you care and you want to help people and you really have a gut feeling for what you're doing, quite literally even. And to me, that's the most important thing that you can be sharing with people.
Mm. Natural. He's natural. He's coming through. He's naturally wants to help people. This is the thing. I mean, we get so much of these companies. Oh, yes, we're here to help you and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think we've got to bring it back to people we can trust. And yeah, like I said, the links for Matt's channel and the shop where you get 10% off will be below. So go and check all that stuff out and share this stuff around, guys. Share this information around because this is what we need. A lot of people are having issues, right, with their body machines, especially after the last 3 years. And I think we're we're coming. Well, if we didn't already realize it, we realize now that this non-natural, cures aren't. Yeah, they don't help natural systems, do they? So yeah, thanks for all your work, and thanks for the chat there, Matt. Like Lorenzo said, you've brought a lot of good information out. I'd never heard of the pearl powder before. So go and check all that out, especially for eyesight, things like this, like you mentioned, which it's something I need to work on. I'm got because that's another thing, right? We're staring at screens all day, and now everyone's wearing glasses. So these are all these energies. So I think we've just got to basically get back to the natural grid and take responsibility as well for ourselves and our health.
I completely agree, and what you just said is why Google has a patent for glasses, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what they don't patent these things for fun, right? They patent because they know that things that they're trying to push, just like Walmart has a patent for robotic bees. So you see these companies, they are doing things behind the scenes as they're trying to set up things. But the fun part is we're going to disrupt all that. And I really, I'm not having any of that happen. And like you said, is, the cool part about all of this related to healing, just these simple things is that once you start just doing one thing, you'll want to do another. And the body will start to heal very quickly. And you won't want to be another way, right? Because nobody wants to go back to having health ailments. You want to be at your most optimized level at all times. So, then you can then help others. And that's why, like you were saying with our website, I put up a lot of blogs and a lot of videos for just people to share and just put the information out and share to other people. So, there's solutions rather than just, it's genetic, that's what it is. It's just genetic, it's like, no, it's not. It's not. And also on that topic, they don't even know what genes and genetics really even actually go.
No, not at
we
all.
can talk about that for hours too as well, so.
Yeah, totally agree. All righty. Well, thank you again for your time. Thanks for being here, Lorenzo. And it'd be good to get you back in the future and continue the conversation and get this information out there.
Yeah, I'd love to have that gene chat with you one day.
Definitely. We'll have another one.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. And everyone out, thanks for spending some time with us. Stay awesome, and we'll talk to you all on the next upload. Bye for now.
Remember, in the end, nobody wins unless everybody wins. Come on!